This frightening tale begins when two friends, Mel and Jules, arrive at the airport after returning from a trip to Mexico. As they exit, Mel appears exhausted and is still experiencing motion sickness from the flight. She then takes a moment to collect herself as Jules goes to buy a bottle of water for her. She suddenly becomes aware of an older man staring at her, but she doesn't give it any thought. Just then, two young guys who introduce themselves as Seth and Matt approach Mel and ask her for her name. However, Jules comes in and tells Mel about a water fountain by the bathroom because it appears that everything is closed at that hour. After a while, as the two of them wait to collect their luggage, Mel notices a little deaf girl and starts speaking with her using sign language. In the meantime, Seth approaches Jules and strikes up a brief conversation before helping her with her luggage. Mel's luggage, on the other hand, is nowhere to be found, and she's told to come back the next day to retrieve it. Following this, Mel and Jules wait in the pouring rain outside the airport for a ride home. Eventually, a shuttle bus shows up, and Mel flags down the driver to request a ride. Just moments later, another shuttle arrives, and the driver inside voluntarily offers them a ride. Jules informs the second driver that they already have a ride, but this person continues to insist. When they decline, he asks Mel to find out the bus fare from the first driver, which is $30. Then the second driver offers them a ride for only $15. But before Mel and Jules can decide, the first bus sets off, compelling them to board the second one. And when they enter the bus, they are greeted by a shy, middle-aged man named Andy. Meanwhile, Seth and Matt are also seen waiting for a ride nearby. Just then, Seth notices Jules and he tries to persuade Matt to board the same shuttle as them. Matt initially refuses to do so, but he eventually decides to accompany Seth. However, when they approach the driver, he draws their attention to a sign that reads, "No more than 3 stops," indicating that this bus will only accommodate a maximum of 3 passengers at once. The driver tries to get the men to leave, but Jules informs him that the guys are with them, and he reluctantly lets them join in. Now, Seth sits near to Jules, leaving Matt to adjust with Mel. During the trip, Mel shows her signing skills to Matt while Seth and Jules flirt with each other. They are also unaware of the driver taking an unusual route for a while, but when they do, he claims that a construction issue is to blame. Suddenly, a mysterious car speeds right at them, causing the shuttle bus to veer off the road. The driver then pulls over to check the damage and informs them that they have a flat tire. Getting a little concerned, Jules opts to call a cab, but there seems to be no service, so Matt offers to help change the tire. In the meantime, Mel introduces Jules, Seth, and Matt and herself to Andy, who seems like a sweet family man, and he introduces himself to them. After a while, Mel approaches Matt, who's helping the driver with a new tire. Then, as the driver searches for some nuts for the wheel, Matt holds the tire and rests his hands on top of it. Horrifyingly, the whole bus collapses upon his hand, severing all of his fingers as a result. So Seth quickly gives his shirt to cover Matt's fingers as they board. Just then, the driver oddly takes hold of Matt's dismembered fingers and places them in a Ziploc bag. Eventually, as they seem to get lost, Seth starts getting increasingly furious with the driver and pulls out some maps to help him get back on the right route. All of a sudden, the driver pulls a gun and commands everyone to take a seat in the back. At this point, poor Andy begs to be let out and even offers him cash in exchange, but it is of no use. Lastly, the driver demands cooperation and takes everyone's phones and wallets before driving off with them. Meanwhile, Mel believes that the driver isn't going to let them leave now that everyone has seen his face. She also tries to convince them that the driver knowingly injured Matt as he was the only real threat to him, but no one believes her theories. As Mel and Seth argue about taking action, Jules finds a flare under the seat from the safety kit. used to bandage Matt's hand. She then quietly notifies Mel, who comes up with a plan to get the window open, but she finds it locked. Just then, Andy and Seth see this and cause a commotion, possibly fearing for their own lives. They try to take the flare, but during the tussle, Andy accidentally pulls the lid off. This sets the flare off, and Jules quickly throws it into the boot of the bus. Obviously, the driver sees this and pulls over to remove the flare. Seeing this as an opportunity, Jules gets off of her seat and runs for the door. But unfortunately, she finds it locked and the key is missing, so she beeps the horn instead. Moments later, the driver re-enters and points a gun at both Seth and Andy. He pretends to shoot Andy, but instead he pulls out a switchblade and heinously digs through Seth's face. As a warning for everyone else, suddenly he changes his plans and drives them to an ATM booth where he sends Jules to withdraw some money. While she's inside, Jules comes up with a plan and discreetly knocks some paper into a bin, setting it on fire to set off an alarm. Unfortunately, the driver sees this and rushes towards her, but she quickly slams the door. Taking a chance on this, Mel tries to escape but finds the door locked again. As she looks around, she finds a crowbar on the floor, so she smashes the window with it, jumping out. However, the driver yells at her and threatens her that he will let Jules suffocate inside if she doesn't show herself. At last, this plan is also to no avail, as Mel has no choice but to surrender. Following this, he drives them to a supermarket and gives Mel some cash to buy some supplies and a big bottle of water. Then he threatens to kill everyone if she attempts to warn anyone at all. Yet she somehow discovers a security camera and stands before it to ask for help. Mel hands a note to the cashier instructing her to check the security tapes when she leaves. Unfortunately, the cashier learns that the CCTV was never turned on. On the other hand, Mel finds that the driver and her fellow passengers have already left. Meanwhile, the driver chains Seth and Andy together on the bus, making them remove the girls' valuables and passports from their bags. Jules and Matt are also instructed to fasten their seatbelts in order to avoid any escape. Then Seth tries to persuade Andy to escape with him, but he is hesitant out of fear, so Seth quickly sets himself free and takes off with the driver exiting the vehicle. Eventually, the driver runs him over with the bus and even reverses over his body to make sure he's dead. Next, the driver returns to pick up Mel and Andy and forces them to buckle up as well. But when he finds out that she bought a bag of ice against his orders, Mel adamantly claims that it was for Matt and applied it to his mutilated fingers. After a while, Mel shows Matt a knife that she hid in the ice and uses it to cut her belts. Then Matt smashes the window with the ice bag and they all shout for help. But the driver hurriedly approaches them, grabbing the gun. So Mel swiftly digs his wrist with the knife. On top of that, Matt smacks him over the head with the ice bag, which prompts Mel to seize the gun and shoot the driver. Jules and Andy are able to break free after this, and she forces the driver to give the keys to the belts. She then straps the driver in and gets behind the wheel of the bus, leaving Matt with the gun and Andy with the knife. Following this, the situation quickly deteriorates as Andy nonchalantly stabs Matt in the throat. However, no one notices this until it's too late. He then grabs the gun and puts it on Mel's head, telling her to get away from the pedals. Finally, it is revealed that Andy has been in league with the driver all along. Following this, Mel and Jules are forced to put their belts on, and Andy mistreats them until the driver gets him to stop. After a while, the driver stops at a bridge nearby and along with Andy dumps the dead bodies of Matt and Seth in the water. Later, Mel finds a tire iron under the seat and manages to discreetly drag it by her side. Andy then wraps tape around Jules' mouth and does the same to Mel before cutting a piece from each of their hair for a keepsake. Just as he turns his back on the girls, Mel hits him several times with the tire iron, forcing the driver to stop. She eventually breaks herself free and hits the driver on the hand as he tries to get the gun. Now Mel takes control of the bus and drives away, but the driver immediately rushes towards her. Shortly after, she finds a knife, and when the driver reaches for the wheel, she digs him in the knee. Additionally, Andy also comes to attack her again, but Mel knocks him down with a fire extinguisher. The driver comes over again, and as they fight, the bus crashes into a wall. Following the crash, Jules wakes up to find Andy dead and the driver and Mel lying unconscious and motionless. She then runs away, finds a car passing by, and flags it down. Within seconds, a man gets out and helps her get into the car to take her to the hospital. Jules then murmurs about Mel still being alive, so the man calls to report this accident. Unfortunately, this kind man is run over by the bus before he can help her any further. Additionally, Jules is also forced back on the bus, where the driver takes them to a warehouse. Now, as they reach the isolated warehouse, the driver asks if Mel and Jules have any tattoos. Jules reveals that she has one, but he forcibly burns her tattoo to remove it, and puts a bandage over it. He also takes the girl's driver's license and puts them in a drawer that is already full of other IDs of people he has kidnapped or murdered over the years. Shortly after, he makes Jules dye Mel's hair blonde before making them strip down to their underwear. He then orders the girls to wear white high heels for an inspection. Strangely, the man who inspects them is revealed to be the one who ran them off the road earlier, and the same man who was seen observing Mel at the airport. As the driver inspects their bags, he finds that Jules has antifungal medicine and Mel has medication for motion sickness. Now that he knows Jules has a yeast infection, she is of no use to the driver, so he takes her onto the bus and gasses her with a tube connected to the exhaust. Meanwhile, Mel breaks the mirror and threatens to cut herself with a shard of glass, which would make her useless to him as well. However, as the driver approaches Mel to disarm her, she digs him in the arm with the glass. She also digs into his thigh, and when he falls over, she hits him in the face with the light fixtures. Finally, Mel finds the gun and shoots him before attempting to escape on the bus. However, the bullet only skims over his head, so before she can start the bus, the driver attacks her once again. Then the two of them scuffle for a while before the driver forces Mel into a large wooden crate containing the items Mel purchased earlier in the store. Trapped inside the dark crate, Mel yells for help, but no one is there to hear her screams. Finally, as she's being carried away, Mel discovers a photo of 7 young white women in a filthy underground cellar. The photo shows the girls looking gloomy and bruised up, completely naked, with their hair dyed blonde and wearing white high heels like they were forced to wear earlier. It seems like those girls were also kidnapped by the driver and forced to become prostitutes overseas. As Mel looks at the photo in horror, it becomes apparent to her that she is to be sold as a sex worker too, and the supplies are for her trip. The crate is then loaded onto a cargo destined for East Asia, and as this thriller ends, we see Mel's luggage turning up at the airport as another day begins. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching.